The top hostess at a nightclub would secretly hide her money inside sanitary pads after every client, doing everything she could to keep her roommate from noticing it. But Xianhua was not afraid the other person would steal it. Rather, this dirty money pointed to a shameful secret, and once it was exposed, she would fall into an abyss with no way back. This is the latest Korean suspenseful action spy thriller in 2026. Human Intelligence. It has to be said, the film absolutely deserves its adults-only label, because the story not only involves political games, intense large-scale confrontations, terrifying international human trafficking, and struggles of human nature, but the director once again shamelessly presents his overly indulgent visual style. Believe me, after watching it, you will definitely sigh and admit that even if people have 100 reasons to laugh at Korea, when it comes to movies, there is really nothing much to criticize. The story begins in Vladivostok, Russia, inside a restaurant called Ararang, where a Korean man named Manager Zo meets with a Russian acquaintance. Realizing they were wealthy people, the manager asked Xianhua, who understood Korean, to serve them. Seeing a fellow Korean working in a foreign country, Manager Zo understood that Xianhua wanted to earn foreign currency. So in order to help her escape her hardship sooner, he quietly told her that if she served the Russian friend well tomorrow night, she would definitely receive a generous tip. Because of certain reasons, and because she truly needed a large sum of money, Xianhua agreed without hesitation, but what she never expected was that what awaited her was a bottomless abyss. After arriving at the designated hotel, the Russian did not ask Xianhua to serve him. Instead, he arranged for her to talk with the waiting Manager Zo. Manager Zo got straight to the point and said that as long as Xianhua was willing to become an informant and gather certain information for him, he would pay her accordingly. It turned out that Manager Zo was an agent of the South Korean intelligence service, and they had recently learned that a certain mafia organization in Vladivostok was involved in international human trafficking, with the targets being North Korean women. After investigating from many sides and piecing together the information, they also confirmed that the organization was involved in powder trafficking. With such a huge black market chain, the intelligence service had reason to suspect that the North Korean consulate stationed in Russia might not be able to separate itself from the case. In order to give the intelligence service a major win, the minister sent Manager Zo to crack the case. After finding out that Xianhua had fled because her mother had cancer and came to Vladivostok to work and make money, Manager Zo put down a box of medicine and told Xianhua that although it could not fully cure her mother, it could at least ease her pain, end their wandering life sooner, and arrange surgery for her mother as early as possible. Xianhua agreed to Manager Zo's conditions and decided to become an informant who collected intelligence, considering that the North Korean consulate, in order to send defectors back to the country, would have security personnel come and arrest anyone once they had information on a defector. Every time Manager Zo met Xianhua, he used an extremely secretive method, not only passing information through 2 separate rooms, but before Xianhua left the hotel, she would also deliberately leave behind a few strands of hair, doing everything possible to avoid drawing the manager's suspicion. Soon, Xianhua gathered important information, and this time she took out a small bag of powder and told Manager Zo that the manager had given it to her. The manager required her to secretly mix it into the guests' drinks whenever she had the chance while outside, so that the guests would become dependent on it and start buying it. Although there was still no hard evidence for the moment, the two of them believed that this was absolutely connected to the mafia and the consulate. But just as they began to think that the mission would keep going smoothly like this, that they would soon get solid evidence, destroy the operation in one move, and arrest the mastermind behind it, the sudden arrival of an unexpected guest completely threw their plan into chaos. That day, a North Korean man and his girlfriend had just returned to their rental home when they were suddenly attacked for no apparent reason.
I'm Park Gun with the Ministry of State Security. Human trafficking and smuggling citizens across the border is illegal, so I've come to arrest you.
It was clear that North Korea had also learned about the human trafficking, which was why they had sent Park Ji-yeon to investigate it thoroughly and bring the mastermind to justice. In order to force the middleman to tell the truth, Park Ji-yeon took him to the consulate for questioning, but before he could begin a brutal interrogation, Consul General Hwang Chi-song suddenly walked in and said he would handle the questioning himself, because he did not want to treat his fellow countrymen too harshly, since this was not the consul's job in the first place. The sharp-minded Park Ji-yeon sensed that something was off, but because Hwang Chi-song outranked him, Park Ji-yeon had no choice but to let him take over the interrogation. Seeing that the North Korean man was not going to finish writing his confession and self-criticism anytime soon, Hwang Chi-song decided to welcome Park Ji-yeon properly, and the two of them went to the restaurant called Arirang. Hwang Chi-song's lazy and indifferent attitude made Park Ji-yeon begin to suspect that he did not want to take the case seriously at all. To avoid wasting too much time, Park Ji-yeon simply got straight to the point and reminded him that because women had been disappearing from the country again and again, the security department had traced it back to the mafia. So his mission was to find the mastermind, and he hoped Hwang Chi-song would cooperate in making the arrest. But after hearing that, Hwang Chi-song did not care at all, and instead changed the subject, hinting that many years ago, an outstanding agent had become too obsessed with investigating a certain case, and in the end, he mysteriously disappeared in Vladivostok. Although Hwang Chi-song did not say it too plainly, Park Ji-yeon still understood that he was warning him not to go too far. That made him come up with a suspicion that maybe Hwang Chi-song was connected to the human trafficking. But before Park Ji-yeon could figure out how to dig deeper, something happened that caught him completely off guard. The moment Seonhwa appeared pushing a dining cart, Park Ji-yeon froze in disbelief. Seeing Park Ji-yeon staring at Seonhwa without blinking, and Seonhwa leaving immediately after delivering the food without saying a word, it was obvious that not only did the two know each other, but they had also shared a past many years ago. But no matter how they tried to hide their emotions, Hwang Chi-song still noticed the subtle connection. Soon after, Seonhwa changed into North Korean clothing and began singing a Korean song on stage. And even more memories came flooding back to Park Ji-yeon. But just as he was overwhelmed with mixed emotions, a shocking and baffling piece of news instantly pulled him out of his memories and back into reality. A staff member from the consulate told him that the man who had been arrested had just taken his own life during the interrogation after failing to endure the humiliation. When Hwang Chi-song told him that he could return to Pyongyang and investigate the man's family, Park Ji-yeon had no choice but to believe that the man's death had been arranged by Hwang Chi-song, and that Hwang Chi-song was definitely hiding some kind of secret. Thinking about how he had just run into an old acquaintance, Park Ji-yeon decided not to follow the suggestion, and swore that he would uncover everything before returning to Pyongyang. A few days later, Seonhwa secretly met with manager Zo again, and considering how Seonhwa had always cooperated obediently, Manager Zo promised that as long as they cracked the case, he would arrange for Seonhwa's mother to have surgery in Seoul, so Seonhwa could stop worrying completely. According to the constitution, both she and her mother would become citizens by then. Although Seonhwa wanted that more than anything, she had already lost confidence in being able to complete the mission. Seonhwa admitted that people from the security department had arrived, and although on the surface they were also here to catch the traffickers, she was still worried that she would be discovered and forcibly sent back by the consulate. Seeing that Seonhwa seemed unable to get past this fear, Manager Zo could only stop putting pressure on her, and told her that they did not need to meet for the time being, and that she could take some time to calm down. But even though the two of them decided to stop meeting and passing intelligence for a while in order to avoid attracting attention, that night, Park Ji-yeon still secretly found Seonhwa and questioned her about why she had disappeared without a word. It turned out that the two were not only lovers, they had even once almost gotten married. Although Seonhwa did not give a clear answer, Park Ji-yeon could still realize that Seonhwa had no choice but to defect and work overseas in order to treat her mother's illness. Park Ji-yeon's appearance and concern made Seonhwa heartbroken over this relationship. But what the two of them never expected was that before they could even calm their sorrow, a cruel test was about to arrive, because the two of them had secretly met, and that exact moment was photographed by people from the consulate. After learning this information, Hwang Chi-song immediately ordered his men to investigate Seonhwa's movements and determine whether she was hiding something. At the same time, in order to make sure the arrest mission could proceed smoothly, Manager Zo had no choice but to start investigating who exactly the agent sent by the security department was. But what they found was shocking, because although the surveillance outside Arirang restaurant confirmed that someone from the security department really had come, There was no information at all in the database. Fortunately, when Assistant Lim saw the other parties secretly meeting Xianhua behind the restaurant, her intuition as a woman instantly led her to conclude that the two were lovers. And what shocked them even more came afterward, because after zooming in on the surveillance footage, they discovered that people from the consulate had actually filmed that moment, and then another camera revealed that something suspicious seemed to have been illegally taken out of the North Korean consulate. Manager Zhou immediately had a bad feeling. He suspected that what had been transported out was a body. If his guess was correct, then once Xianhua was found out to be an informant, she would very likely be silenced as well. To keep Xianhua from losing her life because of this, Manager Zhou immediately decided to end the cooperation, even though his assistant opposed the idea and reminded him that they were already on the verge of cracking the case, and that the intelligence department would never allow this. Manager Zhou still ignored everything, believing that Xianhua had to be pulled out of danger. The reason Manager Zhou was so determined was because of something that had happened a year earlier. At that time, in order to carry out a mission, Manager Zhou had used the same method to turn a woman in a red light district in Southeast Asia into an informant. But just when they had successfully gathered the intelligence and were about to bring the informant back to South Korea, she accidentally revealed another piece of information while giving her testimony, saying that the mafia was involved in powder trafficking. The moment the minister heard that, driven by impatience for quick results, he immediately said that the informant needed to provide more information before approval could be given to bring her back to South Korea. When Manager Zhou and the minister were locked in a standoff, the gang outside noticed that too much time had passed, and instantly realized that something was suspicious about the informant, so they decided to silence that worker. Although Manager Zhou ignored the minister's warning, disobeyed the order, and fought the gang, finally rescuing the informant, the informant still died in the end. This filled Manager Zhou with overwhelming guilt, and after fully experiencing the coldness of the department, he decided from that moment on that he would do things his own way. And whenever something unexpected happened, he would always put the informant's safety first. Therefore, after Xianhua helped him in Vladivostok, and after learning that she also carried a tragic fate, Manager Zhou was prepared to end their cooperation at any time. Now that Xianhua had clearly fallen into danger, Manager Zhou decided to temporarily give up the mission and help Xianhua escape the vortex first. But even though he chose to break the rules, he did not expect trouble to arrive first. Consulate staff had already pulled the footage of Xianhua meeting and exchanging information at the hotel, and after learning Manager Zhou's secret, Huang Qisong naturally could not ignore it. In order to send Xianhua back to the country and also remove Park Jian, the thorn in his side, Huang Qisong came up with a scheme. He immediately sent his men to bring Park Jian over.
Hey, don't hurt him now, Comrade Captain. It's just us. Look, the Comrade Consul General wants to see you urgently.
Park Jian originally thought they were going to kill him, but after arriving at the consulate, he was told that his fiancée, Xianhua, was already considered a rebel. With a warning in his tone, Huang Qisong reminded Park Jian that he had to hurry and bring Xianhua in for questioning. Bound by his absolute loyalty to the state, Park Jian had no choice but to raid the workers' dormitory and order people to symbolically turn the place upside down, to see whether there were any other rebels. To keep Xianhua from losing her life, Park Jian quietly reminded her how to explain herself while searching her body.
They'll break you. Admit that you agreed to work with the South Koreans, but only so you could get intel to pass on to me.
I got something.
But the moment he finished warning her, the consulate staff said they had found the money Xianhua had received from Manager Zhou. In order to force Xianhua to give in and tell the truth, Huang Qisong used a twisted method, not only demanding that Xianhua write down everything that had happened, but also everything she could remember since childhood. For the sake of getting treatment for her mother, Xianhua refused to write anything about Manager Zhou, even if it meant suffering to the end. Seeing that Huang Qisong was about to lose patience, and wanting to keep Xianhua from being subjected to even crueler treatment, Park Jian had no choice but to step forward and carry it out himself. Realizing that Xianhua would never compromise, and in order to get rid of the trouble in front of him as quickly as possible, Huang Qisong could only send Xianhua back, using that move to force Park Jian to return as well, but he underestimated Park Jian's conviction, because in order to complete the mission assigned by the state, Park Jian chose to stay in Vladivostok. He told Xianhua that once she returned to Pyongyang for questioning, she had to overturn the testimony she had just given, and that he would find Manager Zhou and force him to apply through his department to rescue her by having her testify. Although after Xianhua was taken away, the consulate staff refused to help Park Jian find Manager Zhou on the grounds that they had received no order. They still gave him a photo, and that place was Manager Zhou's safe house. But what Park Jian did not know was that Manager Zhou was not at the hideout at all at that moment, and was instead on the road following the vehicle carrying Xianhua. It turned out that when Park Jian raided the dormitory earlier, Manager Zhou had sharply sensed through the surveillance outside the consulate that Xianhua was about to be arrested, so he immediately rushed to the entrance of the consulate and waited quietly while listening in for a chance to rescue her. Soon the car arrived at a harbor, and Xianhua originally thought she really was about to be sent back, but the car merely passed by, clearly heading somewhere else. Xianhua instantly realized that something was wrong, and next, she was finally about to understand everything. A moment later, the car stopped in a remote wilderness, and when she saw the mafia boss Alexei carrying out a powder deal with Huang Qisong, the suspicion in Xianhua's heart was confirmed. Manager Zhou, who had been lying in wait, saw the goods and the people caught red-handed, immediately started snapping photo after photo with his camera, and then sent them to his assistant to keep them safe. Because they were also involved in human trafficking, Huang Qisong conveniently handed Xianhua over to Alexei, and warned him to be careful of a man named Park Jian. After the two cars split up, Manager Zhou knew he could not wait any longer, and after following the vehicle to the mafia's hideout, he immediately put on his gear for a forced assault. But before he could go in and rescue Xianhua, his phone suddenly received a text message from his assistant asking for help. It turned out that while Manager Zhou was tailing the car, Park Jian had found the safe house through the photo. After the assistant finished writing the report, sent it to the minister, and prepared to leave, she ran into Park Jian, who had just arrived. After learning that the other side wanted to force a meeting with him, and that the real purpose was simply to rescue Xianhua, Manager Zhou immediately explained the current situation.
Is this Chesona's lover? I'm at the place where she's being held right now.
Bullshit, she got extradited.
Check with the agent you're with. She can verify what I'm telling you.
I said one bone every minute.
Now that it was confirmed that the person behind everything really was the relentlessly scheming Huang Qisong, Park Jian's anger reached its peak. But what caught him even more off guard was that Huang Qisong had already arrived at Aerorain restaurant in order to eliminate him as a threat. And under intimidation, he forced Xianhua's manager to say on camera that Park Jian and Xianhua were traitors who had betrayed their country, giving him an excuse to get rid of them both. The moment he learned that the woman he loved was about to be taken away, Park Jian immediately rushed toward the mafia hideout. The consulate staff in charge of surveillance saw this and quickly reported it to Huang Qisong. In order to stop Park Jian from rescuing Xianhua and to prevent his dealings with the mafia from being exposed, Huang Qisong called Alexei and told him to prepare for Park Jian's arrival. But what they did not expect was that another threat, Manager Zhou, had arrived first. A moment later, Park Jian also drove to the location, and with his excellent driving skills and planning, he easily took care of the security at the entrance. After learning that there were two unexpected intruders, Alexei had no choice but to order all his men to temporarily stop the transport work and go intercept them. As the number of guards kept decreasing, Xianhua finally gathered the courage to resist, although Manager Zhou brought down many gang members. Before he could even catch his breath, another group appeared and launched a fresh attack. Fortunately, Manager Zhou was wearing body armor, otherwise he likely would not have made it through that ambush. Carefully, he slowly moved into another room, and Manager Zhou was stunned by the scene in front of him, because he had not expected that aside from the area where Xianhua was being held, So many other girls were imprisoned there as well, but before Manager Zoe could process it, the gang found him and opened fire again. Fortunately, just as he was being overwhelmed and could barely fight back, Park Ji-yeon arrived in time and drew away part of the firepower. Although the two of them had their own grievances and each wanted to teach the other a lesson, in the very next second they both realized that they had to deal with the enemies in front of them first. And just like that, the two leads joined forces and launched their counterattack. At the same time, while all the firepower was being drawn away, Seonhwa quickly freed the fellow countrywomen who were being held captive. Although after an intense gunfight only Alexei was left alive, with a heavy weapon in his hands, he showed no fear under the pressure from the two men, and even gained the upper hand for a while. But the bullets in a gun are limited after all, and just as Park Ji-yeon also ran out of ammunition, the two sides began fighting hand to hand. Yet even with the advantage in numbers, the two of them still could not gain the upper hand at all, and were each firmly overpowered by the formidable mafia boss Alexei, falling into a losing position. Fortunately, when Park Ji-yeon was pinned down by the head, Manager Zoe seized the opportunity and got behind Alexei, although Manager Zoe ended up landing the final blow. He was also forced to witness a painfully sweet moment. After removing the threat at the scene, Park Ji-yeon immediately put shoes on Seonhwa, while Seonhwa tore off a piece of her dress and gently wrapped the wound on Park Ji-yeon's hand. But just when everyone thought they had escaped danger and could leave safely, they never expected that the crisis was far from over. The main villain, Hwang Ji-sung, had been waiting outside for a long time, and the moment Park Ji-yeon quickly realized it, Hwang Ji-sung raised his gun and began firing wildly. Because there were still consulate personnel hidden in the dark, Manager Zoe's side had already become a target, and those girls who tried to run out and save their fellow captives all fell under Hwang Ji-sung's gunfire. Fortunately, just when the situation became critical, Assistant Lim arrived and drew away some of the firepower, giving Manager Zoe a chance to strike back. Although the assistant's support came just in time, while Manager Zoe was covering the girl's retreat, his arm was still hit by Hwang Ji-sung. Seeing that this could not go on, and in order to deal with the consulate personnel hiding in the dark, Park Ji-yeon moved under Manager Zoe's covering fire, and in a split second, without anyone noticing, he appeared in front of the consulate man and took him down with a single shot. But just when they thought Hwang Ji-sung would finally stop, he unexpectedly opened fire again.
Please save him. Please help him.
Although Park Ji-yeon did not lose his life on the spot, sadly, his time was already running out. In order to let the woman he loved leave safely, Park Ji-yeon gave Manager Zoe a look, and Manager Zoe immediately realized that Park Ji-yeon intended to use his own sacrifice to completely get rid of the relentless Hwang Ji-sung. As helpless as he felt, Manager Zoe still understood the situation, so after Park Ji-yeon hinted at the plan, the two of them moved together toward a nearby vehicle. Successfully drawing Hwang Ji-sung closer, with the protection of his body armor, Manager Zoe lived up to Park Ji-yeon's trust and, after a close call, finally dealt with Hwang Ji-sung. At that moment, with only his last breath remaining, Park Ji-yeon saw the woman he loved slowly walking toward him, and without hesitation, he whispered his final wish into Manager Zoe's ear. The moment Seonhwa came to Park Ji-yeon's side, Park Ji-yeon had just breathed his last. Not long afterward, after returning to South Korea, Manager Zoe reported the case to his superiors. Although the criminal organization had been successfully destroyed, the leaders were not very satisfied, and the reason was why Seonhwa had not come to South Korea. Manager Zoe explained that on the way back, Seonhwa's mother had suddenly died from cardiac arrest, and that had caused Sianhua to lose the last bit of faith she had left. So at Sianhua's request, he sent her somewhere else, so that she could live a peaceful and stable life. Manager Zhou's decision to act on his own led to him being dismissed from the intelligence department, but Manager Zhou had already prepared himself for that outcome, and after saying goodbye to Assistant Lim, he immediately set off for Sianhua City. From his determined actions, it was not hard to see that Manager Zhou had decided to take Park Jian's place and quietly watch over Sianhua from then on. And with that, the film comes to an end.